Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back yet again. It's pretty misty, pretty crummy outside, so we're going to be talking Allis C yet again. Now, last time I had mentioned that the valve seats were looking pretty rough on this thing, because they were. However, now they're looking a lot better and we're ready to start fitting valves. But before I go into that, I want to talk about what I did. So the way you would normally go about doing valve seats, call up the machine shop, send them the head, and boom, a couple weeks to a couple months later, considering the fact that I'm not a professional, would get the head back with some nice valve seats on, probably with new valve guides in it. I went with plan B and decided to wing it and do it myself with the tools I had. And I'm not disappointed with the results. So step one, the valves are obviously at an angle, so I had to come up with a way of holding it. And what I went with was a standard milling vise on a bridge port, just on an angle plate, and I could set it to the proper angle that I needed for getting the valves done. And to set that angle, what I wound up doing was getting it close and then indicating vertically off the diameter of the valve guides. So by having the valve guides in, and I know I debated this in the last video, that got me able to get that thing perfectly straight up and down with the valve guides. So because the casting is old and not perfectly machined because, well, it's a casting and some of these surfaces aren't that critical, the only thing I had to go off of to straighten it out was where the intake exhaust manifold goes. And with, like I said, with that not being perfect, it required a little bit of shimming, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But eventually we got the thing in straight. And then using my long needle indicator, I could indicate those valve guides to make sure it was perfectly up and down. So after that I switched to a different indicator to tram each individual valve guide in. And what I mean by that is I actually stuck the indicator down into each valve guide and got a number off of it. And let me tell you, it was getting pretty close in some spots. But I wanted to use this indicator instead of the long needle indicator because that long needle skews your results, and it can look like you have a lot better result than you do. And it was just easier to tram them in with this, and it just barely cleared the head in some spots, but it got the job done. So I did each one individually, and I put all those numbers into my location program so that I could get each valve seat that I was about to cut directly on center with the valve guide. And then using a little bit of ink marker, inked it up a little bit so I could see what was cut and what wasn't. And in some spots it was gonna be obvious because of all the pitting, what was freshly cut and what wasn't. In some spots, not so obvious because some of the intakes looked great still. But because I was in there doing them, I decided to do all of them and just give them a quick touch up so that they would be true and centered with the new valve guides. And some of them not nearly as on center as others. But even the ones that were severely pitted, like in cylinder number 2 exhaust, I believe was the worst, it didn't take that much steel or that much material removal to get them to clean up and look pretty. You can see in the before and afters, I mean, it took more than one pass, but I was taking pretty light passes, and they all, I think they came out really good. I'm pretty happy with it. So the first thing I did was I cut a 45-degree seat in for the valve. I was going to do the typical 3-angle seat on this, and we'll see in a minute. This is my first time cutting a 3-angle seat, and I may have screwed it up just a little bit, but it's still functional. So there, I cut all the exhausts, and they look great. And I started with the exhaust because I knew they were the worst, and I wanted to see how they would come out first. Then I moved on to the intakes. They didn't take as much love because, like I said, mainly this was just centering them up with the new valve guides and not so much getting out any corrosion. and they look good as new. And I did all that just using a 45-degree carbide end mill. After that, I inked them back up. I switched to my 60-degree cutter, and I did the lower part of the seat. And this is where I feel like I screwed up a little bit, because I took only a very small amount off with my 30-degree cutter, which left me a lot to take off with my 60-degree cutter. So I wish I would have taken off more with this cutter so that the area above the actual 45-degree seat wasn't so large. And then, like I said, the last thing I did was I came in with that 60-degree cutter and I did the upper seat until I had 1/16 approximately for the actual mating surface between the valve and the head. And you can see in the pictures that seat definitely took up more material than the lower seat, and I wish I would have taken more out with that 30-degree cutter. But it's functional. This head is ready, and the next thing we're going to do is fit the valves to it, and we're going to check them to make sure they're concentric and all sealing off properly. But for my first time doing valve seats with what I had, because I didn't want to wait around for the machine shop, I'd call this project a success. So stick around for the next one, guys. We're going to, like I said, we're going to be fitting the valves and just keep this project moving right along. However, the more I try to move this project along, the more I find little things, sometimes major things, that got to get fixed before we can just keep throwing parts on. And it's getting to the point where it seems like every step of the road I'm finding something that's just too wore out to put back in this engine. So stay tuned, guys. Can't wait to do more. Thanks for watching.